This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm your host, Mac Pritchard. I'm also the founder of Mac's List. It's a job board in the Pacific Northwest that helps you find a fulfilling career. Every Wednesday, I talk to a different expert about the tools you need to get the work you want. Find Your Dream Job is brought to you by Top Resume. Top Resume has helped more than 400,000 professionals land more interviews and get hired faster. Get a free review of your resume today. Go to maxlist.org/topresume. From the outside, the interview selection process can look like a black box. But today's guest says recruiters use common steps to screen applicants. And if you understand how the process works, you can greatly increase your odds of meeting a hiring manager. Agnes Zach is here to talk about how employers choose finalists for job interviews and what you can do to make it to the final round. She's the CEO at Nonprofit Professionals Now. Her organization offers executive search, temporary staffing, and talent evaluation services. Agnes joins us from Portland, Oregon. Agnes, let's jump right into it. We're talking this week about how candidates can get chosen as finalists. Let's start by talking about how you and other recruiters screen applicants. What's the first hurdle you need to get past as a candidate, Agnes, after you send in your application?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Mac, and I feel a lot of empathy for the applicants because it does seem like a black hole. You send in all your information, and all of a sudden there's just silence on the other end, and you don't know what's going on. What we're really trying to do is be the bridge between the client and the final candidates. And so a client has come to us and said, we need a person that can do X. And as the search consultant, we are asking them questions about what does that mean? How do you manage? What does success look like? How will this person grow in this position? Who else will be influential in making decisions and working with this individual? So we're trying to get a 360-degree view of what this particular position will look like and how a person will be successful when they step into that role.
And how does that information help you, Agnes, when that application lands on your desk?
Well, we immediately look at the resume and the cover letter and the screening questions, and we compare the content with what we have learned about the position. So in our instances, we create spreadsheets for every position that says, what are the basic criteria that you have to meet, and what are the evaluation criteria that are going to be necessary in order for a person to be successful at this position? So we are looking through the resume going, how many years of experience do they have? Do they have, for example, executive director experience or management experience? Have they connected with the nonprofit sector? Have they managed employees? Have they managed financial accounts? Whatever those really specific skills are. And it's not like we're looking for a candidate that has 100%, but we are looking for enough indicators that we can look at a position, at a candidate's information and say, yes, you qualify for this position.
I'm sure you've heard that statistic, Agnes. It may be apocryphal, but there's a statement out there that says recruiters might spend 7 seconds looking at a resume. What you describe is a much more intensive process.
Yes.
Typically, what happens? I mean, our resumes, is there sort of a first round where someone does just get 7 seconds and doesn't make it to the next stage, or what's happening?
Well, Mac, because I knew that I was coming on the show with you, I have been keeping really close track to be able to give you a really good answer for that.
Okay. So kudos to you for doing your homework. What did your research tell us?
On average, we spend between 5 and 10 minutes on an application packet. So that means the individual's resume, their cover letter, and the screening questions we've asked. And we spend that time 3 different times in the process. So when you submit your information to us through the application portal, we immediately look at it and say, is this candidate an interesting candidate? Is this candidate look like they're meeting some of the qualifications? Just giving us a general idea of who is applying and who is this job appealing to, and maybe where do we need to be doing additional recruiting to broaden the pool.
And would you say, Agnes, that what you and your colleagues are doing is typical of the industry?
No, I don't believe it's typical. And I think that's why the clients that we have, the nonprofits that we serve, that's one of the reasons why they hire us, because they know that we're going to take some additional time with the people that are applying to make sure that there really is a good fit, that we're getting diversity in the pool, that we're bringing the best candidates forward for the client. So we are a little unusual in the amount of time we spend.
If you're a job seeker and you're getting ready to hit send on that application, and you don't know whether it's going to be a 7-second review or 3, 5 to 10 minute exercises like you just described that you and your colleagues perform, what can you do to stand out and grab the attention of a recruiter?
I think there's a couple of different things that you can do, and some of it you've had mentioned on your show previously. The job description is actually a description of the job. So if you're looking at your resume and you're looking at your cover letter and you haven't used words from the job description that indicate that that's an area of expertise or some sort of skill area that you have, you're missing an opportunity, because the faster you scan, the faster someone like me looks at something, the more likely we are to land on words that we recognize. And the words that we recognize are the ones in the job description, because that's what we've been working on for the last 3 weeks. So you should make sure that there's a repetition of words. Now, it used to be that people would say, oh, well, you just type in a bunch of those keywords and it runs through the computer system and it spits out the other end. I don't even have to have a resume. That's actually not true. They've adapted the systems, and artificial intelligence works much better than it used to. But the humans of us are still trying to say, how does the skill system you have match the requirements that we have to move you forward to the client? And those keywords really matter.
Okay, so keywords matter, but it's not just about parroting back what's in the description.
It's not.
So what advice do you have for someone who wants to do what you just described, demonstrate in writing that they've got not only the keywords, but the skills and experience that match with what the employer wants?
I would say that's the value of your cover letter. If you think about your resume as your data points, these are my metrics, these are my measurables, this is what I've done, this is how successful I've been in my work, that's the resume. The cover letter is the part where you say, and this is why I'm the right fit for you. I think a really key component for candidates to remember is that you are filling a need for the client. The client has a problem. You, as the potential employee, need to fill it. This really isn't about you, the candidate. This is about how you fill that hole. So if you're looking at the job description, you're looking at your skill base, and you can say, I can solve your problem because I can do X. That's what we need in the cover letter.
How do you see candidates get the information they need to address that point? What do they do before they send in their application?
Well, it's really interesting. I think people do a lot of different things now because of the pandemic and because of technology. LinkedIn is always popular. I do, exclusive work with nonprofits and government agencies. So pulling up people's 990s, which are the tax forms that they file at the end of each year. Those 990s have information about the mission of the organization, the programs of the organization, where they've seen growth areas, where they've made changes. They're very informative. Annual reports, Facebook and Instagram to see where they've been engaged. All of those same things that you would do for another position. You are gaining familiarity, you are gaining knowledge, and you are gaining connection. I would say it's helpful, as we say, to say, oh, I know somebody, I can network and I can know somebody. That's helpful, but it is not a guarantee. We are trying to bring a diverse pool forward that hits lots of different buttons for the organization. Knowing that there is a connection is nice, but it's not a guarantee.
And I'm curious, Agnes, is there anything that's guaranteed? Or is it about doing a number of different things, and the more things steps you take in a strategic way, the more successful you'll be.
I think it's the latter. I think people like to think that there's an easy way, but there really isn't. I think being a well-rounded candidate, being a persistent candidate, being an interesting person, that's something that's really big in the nonprofit sector is, can you talk to our constituents? Can you talk to our donors? Can you talk to our board? And by talk, they don't mean, can you parrot back the 3 financial pieces that you had? The real question is, can you talk to them like people?
I want to ask a little more about having people either serve as a referral or make a phone call on your behalf. What's most effective when you go down that road? Is it asking people to contact a certain person to make a certain point? What have you seen work, Agnes?
Generally speaking, the thing that works is a contact to the organization, not to me, that says, this person has a connection to us. This is somebody that we as an organization know and are aware of, and we would like to see them considered for this position. And then that information gets passed to me. If someone thinks they can reach out to me directly about another organization's position, I'm still going to have to go through that step. I'm still going to have to reach back to the organization and say, do you know who this is? Is this somebody that you want me to move forward? So it's more efficient on my side if you go the other way. Also, if you come to me directly, I'm working on 3 to 5 different jobs at the same time. And so you may not get the response that you want. It just may be that I see it and I go, and keep moving.
Well, how do you recommend people build and maintain relationships with recruiters like you throughout their career? Because if somebody stays in the field and they're likely to cross paths with you a number of times, or your company or your colleagues, what's the best way to stay in touch?
I am an active LinkedIn user. I am active with Willamette Valley Development Officers, local nonprofit associations of Oregon chapter. I try to stay connected to AFP. All of those are interest areas around the nonprofit sector, so that I'm actively engaged there. What I really enjoy is having people take a moment to ask if they can just have a conversation with me. I would say about a third of my time, I am just talking to potential candidates. And that doesn't mean that they're a candidate today, that they're looking for a job today. It's that they may be looking for a job in a year or two. And they want to know what's happening in the sector. They want to know what some key skills are that they might want to invest in. They may have some questions about further education, but it's treating me like an informational interview that you would do for anyone else in an organization you're interested in.
And how is that going to help you get an interview one day if someone does apply for a position that you're involved in?
Well, I think what it really does is it brings that well-rounded idea about the person. It's not just a 2-dimensional person, it's now a 3-dimensional person. And as we said, we're using the resume as a data point, we're using the cover letter as our story and our connector and our keywords. This becomes a third point to say, oh yeah, I remember talking to them. They said they had a real interest in moving into this direction, in learning this new skill. I tend to keep a database of about 1,500 folks, and always looking to add more to that. And if we see jobs that hit an interest area, we'll send them out. Recruiting is a big funnel, and we really want to be able to reach as many people as possible with a really interesting job. And as you might imagine, all of the jobs I search for are very interesting. So we are always looking for more people who find the work of the nonprofits exciting as an opportunity.
Well, terrific. Agnes, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, Agnes Zach will continue to share her advice on how employers choose finalists for interviews. To become a finalist for a job, you need a great resume. How good is yours? Get it reviewed for free. Go to maxlist.org/top resume. The experts at Top Resume will share what makes your resume good and not so good. Go to maxlist.org/top resume. You'll get specific ideas to improve your resume now. And if you want, you can hire Top Resume to write your resume for you too. Go to maxlist.org/top resume. Now, let's get back to the show. We're back in the Max List studio. I'm talking with Agnes Zach. She's the Chief Executive Officer at Nonprofit Professionals Now. Her organization offers executive search, temporary staffing, and talent evaluation services. And she joins us from Portland, Oregon. Now, Agnes, before the break, we were talking about how employers choose finalists for interviews. And you walked us through kind of the written application stage, looking at keywords, including them in your resume, writing a good cover letter, looking for a connection in order to get a referral or perhaps a call on your behalf. Now, and you talked about how much time you and your colleagues spend reviewing all this material. Now it's time for the interviews. And let's talk about how people move from that written stage to a phone interview. What's going on there, Agnes?
At this point in the process, the phone interview for us tends to be really skills-based. Can they do X? Do they have experience with Y? Can they tell me how they would approach this problem? So we've looked at their resumes and cover letters. We have ranked them based on what the qualifications are for the position. And we tend to do phone screens with quite a few folks. We don't want to screen anybody out immediately. So we try to keep it a little bit open. But we're looking for precise, clean, 3 to 5 minute answers with a beginning, a middle, and an end. This is not a time to tell me your life story. It's not a time to share the latest vacation stories you've had. I mean, these are really specific, and we're looking for ways in order to differentiate candidates from each other.
I want to talk more about what happens in those phone interviews, but let's just step back. The people who didn't make the cut, what didn't they do that they can control and maybe do differently the next time?
They did not clearly illustrate to us that they had the skills necessary to do this position in the way that the client needed to have it done. Now, I think where people, at least the ones that I talk to, where they get off track just a little bit is they say, well, then I'm not qualified for the position. And that's not what I said. What I said is you did not meet the criteria for this position for the client that we have. So we are performing to a specific criteria that the client has given us. And just because your resume doesn't match it this time doesn't mean that you can never apply for this type of position again. It means that we are representing a specific client, and you needed to think more like, how was I solving the problem for that client?
So what advice would you give somebody who says, well, I looked at the job description. I did everything you told me to, Agnes. I inserted the keywords. I worked on my cover letter. I even had somebody make a call on my behalf, and I still didn't get a phone interview. What do they need to do?
I would be surprised. I would say, well, I'm actually kind of surprised that you didn't get a phone interview. At that point in time, what I often do for folks is I sit down with them, in this case, probably by phone, like we're doing today, and I walk through the resume that they submitted, and I walk through the job description that they compared it to, and I say, this is where I saw a disconnect. And it doesn't have to be me that does this. You can do this with other folks. You can have them review your resume or your cover letter compared to the job description and just have them say, wow, this job description really needs you to do this one thing. And I don't see that you said anywhere in your cover letter that you could do that.
So this doesn't have to be a recruiter. It could be a peer, a colleague, or family member. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. Well, let's move on to that phone interview. And the people who did the things you outlined are getting phone calls. And when you're having that conversation, you talked about looking for skills. How long do these calls typically last? And what's the best way for a candidate to prepare for them?
The calls generally go about 30 minutes, and then there's usually time at the end for us to answer any questions the candidate might have. And oftentimes that's, what's your timeline or those kinds of things. But, it really is true that you should have 2 or 3 questions that are pretty concrete that you can ask at the end of any phone interview. Don't just skip that and say, no, I'm fine right now. I'll save my questions for later. Make sure you have the 2 or 3.
Why does that matter?
It shows that you've investigated the organization. It shows that you have taken an interest in this position beyond what 50 other applicants did. And you have seen something in the materials that makes you wonder, what are they doing here? Why is this important? Why are they engaged in this? And that tells us that you are a candidate that has taken the extra step.
Are there questions you recommend people avoid asking?
At the phone stage, don't ask about salary, don't ask about vacation, don't ask about how soon your vacation accrues. At this point in time, none of that information matters. You're not far enough into the process to be able to be into that negotiation stage. What we're really looking for are questions about how could I be successful in this position? What does the manager really need? I see that the organization is exploring a new program. Why did they make that decision? And some of those I'm not going to be able to answer as a recruiter, and that's okay. You need to show me that you've gone a little extra in this process.
What are you as the recruiter and your colleagues doing as you listen? Are you taking notes? Is there some sort of scoring sheet you're using?
Yes and yes.
Okay,
yes.
Tell us more.
We actually do ours in a 2-step process. So during the phone interview, we are taking notes, and the notes are per question, and so that I can go back and review those. I sometimes work with my colleagues, and so there might be 2 of us doing phone screens, and then we share our notes back and forth to make sure that we've heard or have written up our notes in a way that says, yes, we've covered all these areas. Those notes and those questions are connected to our scoring sheet. So if I ask you a question about finance, I have a finance category on my scoring sheet. If I ask you a question about donor relations, I have a donor relations category on my scoring sheet. And I have already talked to the client about what a quality answer sounds like. What are the pieces of their response that need to be there to let us know that they understand how this works? And so I am ranking each answer on a scale of usually 1 to 5 on how well I feel like the candidate has responded to the question in a way that meets the client's needs.
Agnes, I think everybody who's further along in their career or even at the start of their career has had that experience where the phone rings and it's an employer or a recruiter saying, I want to talk to you about this job. Mm-hmm. Do you recommend people, if it comes out of the cold, ask for some time? What's a good response there?
That's a really interesting one. I tend not to try to surprise people because I just don't really think that's fair. But I think it really depends on your personal comfort level. If you are somebody who needs a moment and wants to take a few minutes to process, there is absolutely nothing wrong with saying, wonderful, I am so excited to speak to you. Do you think we could schedule a time to talk X? In 2 hours, in tomorrow, at this other time. You are somebody they're interested in. Don't assume that you have to just bend over and perform and talk and do these interviews if you yourself aren't ready. You want to be as confident as you can be.
If you get an email from a recruiter offering a phone interview, is it okay to ask for the questions in advance?
It is. And many times the answer will be, we aren't going to do that. While it's an interesting piece, particularly with phone questions, people tend to want more of your spontaneous answer. The questions shouldn't be so difficult that you need to prepare for them. Later on in the interview process, we often try to encourage at least some questions to be given ahead of time so that it's more focused on how a person thinks instead of how they just immediately respond. But the phone interview questions are generally pretty skills-based, and you should be able to answer them without having to see the questions.
What's the number one reason that people don't make it past those phone interviews to the final round of interviews?
I was just thinking, Mac, I knew you were going to ask that. And now I'm just like, is it because they didn't stop talking, or is it because they didn't talk enough? I'm really serious when I say that an answer has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it shouldn't be longer than 3 to 5 minutes. If you give me a 10-minute answer to the first question, we're not going to get through all the questions. And if you give me a one-word answer, I don't think you know what you're talking about. So it really is thinking concretely about what is the story I want to tell, and then telling it specifically. It's like the short answer essays from high school history. If you wrote a page and a half, the teacher said that they didn't think you knew what the answer was, and you were just trying to fill in time. That's what we're looking for in the phone interview, that concise 3 to 5 minute answer that says, I know that I can do this job because I have this skill.
It's been a terrific conversation, Agnes. Now tell us, what's next for you?
Well, Nonprofit Professionals now is working our way down the I-5 corridor. We recently joined 501 Commons, which serves the state of Washington. And so in particular for us, Southwest Washington, Willamette Valley Development Officers is now supporting the Mid-Valley Development Officers organization in Salem. So we're working our way to Salem, and we've got a couple of searches in Corvallis. So we're truly trying to maximize our time up and down the I-5 corridor.
I know people can learn more about your organization and your services, and you have a lot of great resources for nonprofit professionals and job seekers by visiting your website. And that URL is npprofessionals.com. Now, Agnes, given all the terrific tips you've shared today, what's the one thing you want a listener to remember about how employers choose finalists for interviews?
I think the piece of the puzzle that I think we all forget and that we need to remember is that the client has a problem. My nonprofit organization has a problem, and they need it to be solved. And you as a candidate, your job is to help the employer see that you are the answer to their problem. If you can do that, you have a much more likelihood of being moved forward in the process.
Make sure you never miss an episode of Find Your Dream Job. Subscribe to our free podcast newsletter. You'll get information about our guests, free job search articles, and transcripts of every show. Go to maxlist.org/show notes. Again, that's maxlist.org/show notes. Next week, our guest will be Ken Coleman. He's the author of The Proximity Principle and the host of The Ken Coleman Show. You may wonder if you need a new degree or other educational credentials to move ahead in your career. Ken says before you write that first tuition check, you need to ask yourself 2 questions. Don't you want to know what they are? Join us next week when Ken Coleman and I talk about whether you should go back to school to get your next job. I hope you'll join us. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job.